But one segment we'd like to do is, and probably from time to time repeat it, where we interview different people, why they started and why they keep doing it and so forth. Because I don't think a lot of people, like the young men who are here today, they have no idea why anybody would do this. You know, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you think about it. It's not rational. So, in a way, it's meta-rational, but on the everyday level,
On the surface, yeah.
it doesn't make sense. So we don't know if we can. We're trying to do this every Thursday. We didn't do a show last Thursday because we knew probably wouldn't have an audience, have anybody attending. So I wanted to invite you to that, make sure. And that's a good time to bring a friend, somebody who's not really intimidated about sitting for 3.5 hours before. And on Sunday mornings, just keep in mind you can bring anybody anytime. Just bring them at 11 o'clock. Bring them for this. Or bring them for a half-hour sitting if you want, if that's all they can take, whatever they're interested in. But there's no need to bring them at 9 and sit for those. Just as on our retreats, there's no reason to come in at 6 o'clock in the morning if you don't want to. You just come and join when you can. We have open door policy. So our theory around that is better not to be restrictive, not to be exclusive, to be inclusive, and to let everybody apply their own discipline. It's not up to us to discipline other people. It's a little bit different attitude, I think. But I think the secret of our success here has been that we take turns. We learn how to do the various functions so it's not dependent on one person. And people can rotate through. And if somebody can't show up, somebody else can show up, that kind of thing. And that's the same kind of, you might call it laissez-faire or something. You might think it's a negative, but it's the same attitude we have towards having the Zendo open. Just so you can call, and if the resident is here, they'll let you in if you don't have a key. Most of our senior people have keys. So that's kind of our philosophy around a 24/7 Zendo, right? Making that available to the Sangha. So we are recording.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to December 30th, all right? December 30th. Atlanta Soto Zen Center. Don't look at the camera, or else it's an unprofessional look at the camera.
Unless it's a comedy.
Unless you're Stephen Colbert. So today we're doing something a little different. We are doing what is called Dharma Combat, in which this is another public forum that was invented. As I said, when Shakyamuni Buddha was doing his discourses to the public, from what we can tell, from what is recorded, it was a pretty formal situation. They had a lot of people there, maybe visitors and so forth. They may have had a ranking where you sat, sitting up front, and then there seems to be always an interlocutor there interviewing him and asking questions. And there's some cases where in the Sharingama Sutra, he asks each of his disciples to stand up and testify to which sense was the first that they unraveled. You could say he sends us to knots in a scarf, and we have to untie them. You can't untie them all at once, so you start with one. And most of his disciples testify that, like Avalokiteshvara, they unraveled, the sense of hearing unraveled first. Hearing, because it seems to have no boundaries. Inside, outside is very difficult to find in your sense of hearing. Vision, touch, and the other senses are more boundary laden, you might say. So, but the main point here is that those seem to be established public presentations. And we've heard this thing about China, they put the flag up. There'd be a flag flying if there was one going on. So you see the flag from a distance and you want to go hear this talk. There was a time when one teacher in China alone had 5,000 students living there in the monastic grounds or whatever. So big logistical problem as to how to expose people to this one individual who, in those days, I think it was pretty much a hierarchy. Abbot was the top dog, and then you had, kind of a hierarchy of inner circle, outer circle, and all that. And I think they did a lot of public presentation. If you read through the history, you find he throws kind of buckets of cold water on some of your ideas of myths about how things might have been. So I recommend that if you get serious enough about it. But this is one of the forums that they developed, and apparently around this one guy who had so many followers that there was almost no way that he could interface with everybody on any kind of regular basis. So they would trot him out on the platform and a raised dais, and everybody would gather in the field, and some brave soul would come up and say something, you know, about the Buddha Dharma or something, their understanding of something, and he would react. And some of these get pretty brutal. I mean, the ones from Huineng that we recorded, he would sort of cut your legs out from under you if you were BSing about anything. He was known for that, apparently. So this was the source of all of this was one of the main sources of all the anecdotal stories that we read as the history of Zen. Mostly what we have in the history of Zen is just these anecdotes between, you know, monks and teachers and students and so forth. So apparently somebody's sitting around with a pile of rice paper and brushes all the time at these things, and scribes taking all this down. I don't really know. I mean, you have to really imagine. And then they became what are known as koans, or in Chinese konglan, means public case, illogical riddle. You know the sound of two hands clapping. What is the sound of one hand? This is one that was said to have been invented by Hakuin, 18th century, I think. Anybody know? 18th century. Rinzai revived Rinzai in China long after Dogen revived Soto Zen. So the recorded history includes a lot of these public kinds of interactions. And I don't expect what we do here to rise to that level. This is an opportunity, or sink to that level. This is an opportunity for each of you to step forward in a more formal way, bring something up. You can stand, or you can kneel, or you can sit. And the way the process goes is we bow to each other. You bring up whatever it is that you want to bring up. I respond. And if you're satisfied with the response, you say, thank you for your teaching, and leave, and the next person comes up. And I say, may you be well. So Komyo is going through priest training. She will have a Shuso Ango here at one point. Shuso means head monk, head student. It means you're sort of at the bottom of the ladder, actually. So you clean the toilets, you empty the trash, and you're in service to the Sangha while you're here. But in the beginning, there's a brief introductory ceremony where the abbot pleads with this person to please join and help them train the monks, right? And they demur, and they're not going to do it, and they're not worthy, This is a funny little ceremony at the beginning. Then at the end, there's another ceremony, which Matsuoka Roshi referred to, Hosen Shiki, it's called. You remember on Kung Fu, the television show, where they were throwing spears at him? He'd have to knock away all the spears. That's Hosen Shiki. It means Dharma Combat on steroids. So
without the spears.
Without the spears.
Or swords.
So everybody, and usually it's set up where you have person number one in the first chair, 2, 3 in the second chair, and go down the row. Each of them just sort of shouts out, calls out a question. Around a koan, which the candidate has provided, and the book with the koan is handled ritually, and the ceremony and all this stuff. Everybody's supposed to have read the koan and studied it. So they're testing this person using this koan. Not absolutely, you can ask anything you want, so forth. So there are many, many of this kind of thing that you see. Apparently the confession repentances used to be a public thing in the monastery, where each monk or nun would confess their actual transgressions for that month or whatever, on some frequency. And so it wasn't simply distilled down to all my past and harmful karma, as we do. It's sort of all condensed into one simple statement. So I wanted to give you one example of a koan that is used in this context. And then I'm not sure I want to give you any kind of a theme for us to base these on. I would rather they come out of your own experience. But there are a couple of things that what I've written about in the Dharma Bite this month is sort of the twilight zone of Zen, or the dark side of the demons and so forth. I'll mention a couple things about that. But I was thinking through this one where you may have read this, where the monk is coming in with buckets of water, right? Steps into the hall, and the abbot is there, and the abbot says, "Put it down." And so the monk puts the bucket down, one bucket down. Then he says again, "Put it down." He puts it down again. And this is typical. There's often 3 repetitions in rituals and so forth in Zen. And once the buckets are down, he again says, "Put it down," and the monk is enlightened. This is the story goes. So you have to think, well, okay, I can get that. He was still carrying something that he hadn't put down. He thought the habit was saying, "Put the water down," right? So he put one. But that doesn't make sense if you really put yourself, and I was thinking even have everybody stand and hold your hands like you're carrying buckets of water. Anybody ever done that? Has anybody ever done that from a well or from a creek or something where you've actually had that experience? They're heavy, right? And you've walked a long way to get to the building from the water. And so here you are, you're coming in and you're doing this probably every day, right? You're probably doing it many times a day. Who knows what the water is for? To wash dishes, to drink, or whatever it happens to be for. They didn't have plumbing, right? They didn't have electricity and so forth. So this is a normal function that's going on as a very repeat. It's not something unusual or special, right? But there you are, you're coming in, and all of a sudden the head guy says, "Wait a minute, put it down." What? I mean, imagine what would go through your mind. It's like, why put what down? Why would I put, I'm not even where I need to get the water to. Why would I put it down? Right? So all of this is not normal, as we often say about our government. This is not normal these days, So this is a very abnormal thing to happen for this abbot to say. And so when you so he tentatively, you can imagine, he sort of tentatively puts one bucket down. Is that what he's talking about, right? Because this guy could throw you out of the monastery. He owns the monastery. He can burn it to the ground if he wants to, right? He feeds you every day. I mean, that was the way everything was structured in those days. That the abbot owned everything. They were, and there may have been other situations, but in many cases that was the case. So this guy's kind of the most respected, other than the Tenzo, maybe the cook, most respected person in the whole community. So you don't take it lightly if he says something to you, right? You put it down. You think, he says, "Put it down." You've only got one left, right? You put that one down. You still don't get what's going on. Then he says, "Put it down." Suddenly, bang. So if you can try in these koans, dog have Buddha nature. Does dog have Buddha nature? In one case, yes. In one case, no. There's a real dog there. They had mascots, they had dogs, they had temple dogs and so forth. So when we read these things, we tend to take them on this kind of level, But I think they have to get down to this kind of level, like where you try to put yourself in their shoes and be there with the way they were living. Then you can start to get an insight into what may be going on here and why it worked, why it had some effect. Right? I think for us to get to that level in our practice is difficult. For me, it certainly is. But I think most of the things that we do, I've been asked by students to do, and so we've tried them. I can't remember where this one came from or why we started this one. Sensei, Matsuoka, you never did this. But anyway, that's where it's at. So that's kind of my brief recap of where I think it comes from, the history, and why people do it. So at this point, we just invite any one of you to come forward who'd like to take the first turn. And bring up whatever's on your mind. Don't be shy. there's no penalty. So, kneel or sit, whatever you want to do. Stand if you like. You want cushion?
No, I'm fine. No, it's perfect. Since
So this is like a public dokusan in a way.
okay, since taking over on Friday mornings, you know, we chant the Zazen Shin every Friday, and I'm having a real tough time understanding it.
Join the club.
Join the club.
What don't you understand?
Well, it kind of starts off talking about, okay, here's kind of the role of, I don't know what you would call them, elevated people,
What is
longer term
ancestors?
ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here's their attributes, and then all of a sudden it shifts at the end and it just says, you know, there's fish, there's birds.
Okay, for those who don't know, let's go through the central function of Buddhas, the functioning essence of ancestors. You can join me for that. Being actualized within non-thinking, being manifested within non-interacting, being actualized within non-thinking. The actualization is by nature intimate. Being manifested within non-interacting, manifestation is itself verification. The actualization that is by nature intimate never has defilement. Manifestation that is by nature verification never has distinction between absolute and relative. The intimacy without defilement is dropping off without relying on anything. What was the next one? Oh, verification beyond absolute and relative is making effort without aiming at it. The water is clear to the earth, the fish is swimming like a fish. The sky is vast and extends to the heavens, a bird is flying like a bird. What's not to understand?
I guess I don't know what he means by intimate and manifestation and...
Intimacy without defilement, it is by nature intimate. It means it is so close, it is like the water to the fish. It's so close in space and time that its actualization begins with non-thinking, where when you begin to experience non-thinking, you know it. You actually know when you begin to experience non-thinking. But you interpret it as not thinking. You say, oh, for a minute there I wasn't thinking. And then you're thinking again, right? So he's saying it's not thinking, it's not thinking. We don't think our way to enlightenment. We don't get to enlightenment by suppressing thinking. We don't care. We're in between, which is non-thinking. Thinking may come and go just as the breath comes and goes. Doesn't bother us. So that's called non-thinking. Not relying on thinking. Sitting and not relying on thinking. Okay? So actualized within non-thinking, being actualized within non-thinking means that to be within non-thinking, it has to last a while. It has to have duration, right? We can't simply be flashing between not thinking and thinking back and forth, back and forth. We have to settle into a new normal, which is in the middle. And we don't have to be thinking. We don't care if we are thinking. If thoughts are coming and going, that's not what we're doing. That's non-thinking. We're not relying on thinking anymore. But we're still conscious, we're still aware, just as you were as a child, right? You weren't thinking all the time. There wasn't that much to think about. You didn't have language, you didn't have concepts and so forth. So you would just be aware, be conscious. So I think this is what is meant by non-thinking. This is a long explanation because it's a very complicated question. And then being manifested within non-interacting goes a level deeper, where it's way beyond non-thinking. There isn't even any interacting anymore. There's nothing going on here. So this is where this reality begins to manifest itself. But it is so intimate, like the water to the fish, that you can't share it with anybody. It isn't even subject to thought. So it cannot be translated into language. So you see that's kind of the backward step, becoming more and more intimate, right? Internal, or even internal is not a good word, but intimate in the sense that this is not really a subject and object anymore. It's not between you and somebody else that you can share with language. It's between self and self, selfing self, as Uchiyama put, or Kodo Sawaki put it. So I think of it, you come from a science background, as a kind of singularity. It's kind of like this consciousness, this being, collapsing inward of its own mass until all the laws break down, all the rules break down. Nothing holds anymore, right? But then he comes back at the end to say, that it's making effort without aiming at it, without relying on anything. Now he's translating into practicality. What's our attitude going into Zazen? We aim at it we make effort without aiming at it. It leaves us this empty place, right? We make effort without aiming at it. We drop off without relying on anything. So we can't even have understanding. The old Chinese poem says, thought, as knowledge, something in imagination are of no use here. So if you see it as kind of that internal collapsing into a singularity where there's no longer even subject-object, you can see that he's pointing at a very extreme kind of experiential truth. But then he goes on to say, the water is clear to the earth, the fish is swimming like a fish, the sky is vast, it extends to the heavens, a bird is flying like a bird. So he brings it back to the concrete and to, this is not news to the fish, this is not news to the bird, right? This is the way they are. And so we're becoming more naturally the way we are by making effort without aiming at it, sitting without relying on anything, that kind of thing. This is my understanding. It's a beautiful little pivot, that he makes, as usual.
Yeah. Thank you for your teaching.
Thank you, be well. Anybody else on that one? Any confusion? We should point out that even Buddha didn't understand any of this. So it's not subject to understanding. We maybe could use a cushion.
Just with that, why the reference to Buddhas and ancestors? What was the...
Well, I think it's a little bit like, thus have I heard. It's
those.
He's always reinforcing that this is the way. This is the traditional way. This is the essential function of ancestors, the functioning essence of ancestors, the essential function of Buddhas. You think of function, it's how things work, what works. So the function of Buddhas was this very transmission that I'm talking about. The function of Buddhas was helping everybody to have this experience that, you have to put the word experience in quotes, right? This experience that is a non-experience. That was their function. That's what they woke up to. They woke up to this inner reality, penetrated to the core of this reality, in which you have to say that these are its characteristics. It's intimate. It's intimacy without defilement. Defilement in this case means reducing to common understanding. It cannot be reduced to common understanding. So it's intimacy without defilement. It's something only you can know. And well, everybody can know this, but only you can know it for yourself. And it's so intimate, you cannot really share it with somebody else. And so it takes this teaching and training out of the realm of all other teaching and training. If you can get that point, that this is the unique center which doesn't translate. So it's really specifying what's the essential function of Buddhists, and the functioning essence, which is another way of saying essential, but it's their functioning essence of ancestors. All the teachers have been about this. And this is what's about for Buddha. It's called the acupuncture needle or lancet of Zazen. Zazen Shin means, penetrating right to the center.
Needle, yeah.
Well, you're an acupuncturist, so that would be a good metaphor.
Yeah.
Next. That was a lengthy response.
So Roshi, the more I practice, the more meaningless it becomes. The less I practice, the more I need it. Why is that?
Someone said Zen is, or Buddhism maybe, Zen is the pursuit of the understanding of meaning. We think understanding of meaning is redundant, but it's not really. We understand a lot of things that we don't know their meaning. We can understand how to drive a car, but we don't know its meaning, and now we're beginning to see its meaning, its larger meaning. We know the meaning, or a lot of things are very deeply meaningful, like having a child, but we don't understand it. So they're not the same. So you would have to say, what is the true meaning? How do I understand the meaning of my life? Buddha said, maybe this will be helpful. First noble truth is the existence of suffering, and we are to fully understand it. So how do we fully understand the existence of suffering? The reason I think when we stop practicing, we learn what Zen is about when we try not to do it, is because all the temptations of life, all of the demons and so forth that are pursuing us at all times, not only personal, internal, psychological, but also public, commercial, political, all of these are basically, we're possessed by demons. And so you can look at the whole catastrophe, as that kind of thing. And it's so easy to get sucked back into it. And we need sanctuary. We need a place where we put the fence up around ourselves and protect ourselves, in order to return to basics. That makes sense.
Thank you for your teaching.
Anybody else on that? That's one of the dilemmas we're all facing. We have a very public life and very complex.
I don't even understand the question. The first question says, the more I practice, the more meaningless it becomes. I don't understand what you mean by practice. I do not understand what meaningless is. I think that's the problem for me. I tend to stay away from so much thinking about what my practice is, or thinking what meaning is. Except we get reminded in our practice that Zen and practice is no more than chopping wood and carrying water.
Yeah, but
So
we don't chop anywhere to carry water.
Yeah, so
anymore.
those basic things help me.
Yeah.
Like what little things I might be doing, I don't think of it as a meaningful or meaningless.
Right.
I do it. It's like,
Right.
then I.
But when we first start practicing Zen, what we call Zen, right? Zen is different from anything else. We've heard about it, read about it. So I think I'll go check it out. Right? And then we'll go practice Zen. We're certainly not chopping wood or carrying water. We're turning the thermostat up and down and flushing the toilet. So we're far removed from that kind of gut level relationship to survival. Most of us, many people in third world are still living that way. So when we first start practicing Zen, we have all kinds of well-reasoned, thought-out reasons for doing it. We know what we're doing. We're kind of exploring something we haven't done, but we certainly know why we come to this temple. Matsuoka used to say people go through life with something missing. They don't know what it is, but they know it's missing. And they go to the Zen temple to try to find it. So we have all of these reasons, perfectly good reasons for coming to practice Zen. But after even the first session, you know, the first reason may have fallen away. It may no longer be to, well, if I just came to find out what Zen is about, now I've done that. I don't have that reason anymore. So am I going to sit again? This is why I think it's interesting to interview people about this. You know, see what people say. Am I going to sit again? The second time I sit, it certainly can't be to find out what Zen is about. I sort of already know that. And we often say in the very first session, this is all there is to it. Right? People say, you've got to be kidding me. You know, that you just sit still enough long enough, that doesn't, you know, that's not enough. But layer by layer, these things, so-called reasons, the meaning of doing Zen, that's what I think David is meaning. That those meanings aren't there anymore. And so what happens? You either give up or you find deeper meaning. I think that's what he meant. And what do you mean by practice?
Just sitting.
Just sitting.
Just sitting.
Practice in Bodhidharma's day was said to be going out in public, checking out watching your behavior, watching other people's behavior, and comparing it to the precepts. A kind of awareness process. That was called practice, or whatever the equivalent word to practice was. When they sat in Zazen, it was called analysis, because they did something different. I think the source on this, I think, is Red Pine in his Bodhidharma's Zen teachings of Bodhidharma, I think. And so when they sat in Zazen, they did something different. They compared their direct experience to the teachings of Buddhism, not precepts, but they compared their direct experience to what Buddhism says about existence, that existence, there is no such existence without suffering, then, etc., 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 starting from there. The self is a fantasy. Bodhidharma himself instructed he said it's not necessary to do Zazen. We can't prove that Zazen is connected to enlightenment. He said, but when you do Zazen, you know, most people need to do Zazen, but not because it's going to gain them enlightenment, because we have to get rid of our confusion. It takes a lot of time. He said, when you do Zazen, there are 4 levels of observation: physical sensations, emotional mood swings, the breathing. He put second, I think. Physical sensations. Oh no, breathing was first, I think. Physical sensations, mood swings, emotional changes, and mental concepts. And he said the breath comes and goes. This is a little bit like Dogen's Zazen Shin, I think. What we're attaching to or paying attention to is not permanent. It's ever changing. The breath is coming and going. Physical sensations are coming and going. Sometimes they seem very persistent, right? That pain in your leg hangs on. It seems chronic and like you're doing something wrong, but you sit it out. If you sit through it, eventually that too will pass. And then your emotional responses. And finally, the most difficult, the mind and its conceptualization, the clinging mind and grasping mind. But he said if you sit through all this, you'll see that they're like the breath, they're all impermanent. They're coming and going moment by moment. So he's giving you the same kind of instruction that Zazen is giving you, but you're paying attention to see whether in your direct experience you can corroborate the teachings or not. If you can't corroborate the teachings, then something is wrong. Either the teachings are wrong, right, or something is wrong in the way you're approaching this. Why it can't be, there are no other options. So, you know, that's pretty brutal too. So I think practice was now, when I leave the cushion, what we call daily life practice. When I leave the cushion, does it really have any effect? I'm still the same jerk I was before I started doing this. You know, and many of us come into Dokusan and say, I don't understand what's going on. I thought I was through this, but here I am back in this hole again. Right. and we find ourselves back in the same syndrome. It's because they're hardwired. These things are burned into place. Buddha said he had to pull out the root. He had to knock down the ridgepole so the whole structure fell in. So these are indications of how powerful what we're messing with here is, you know, and how brutal we have to be about it in our approach to it, how unrelenting. So I think that's what I understand by practice and meaning. We go to deeper meaning. We bow and bow again, we bow again, we bow again, we bow again. In the beginning, we think we know what the bow means. We have a meaning associated with the bowing, right? After the 150th, 2,000th, 350,000 bow, you don't have that association with it anymore. It's gone somewhere, right? So the bow becomes empty, just like your teacup. And then it can fill up with meaning, right? So this is a common expression in Zen. You think you know what everything means. You have to empty that cup and become empty of meaning, and then, you know, perhaps you will understand true meaning. Very good metaphor.
I would say though that really the value of practice, if you stick with this, sit still enough, long enough, you know, you might sure find, you know, say I thought I was through this, now I'm right back in the same hole. You might be back in the same hole, but this time around you've got a shovel on deck.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's what I would say the value is. I mean, you go the rest of your life, you're going to continue to get angry. Doesn't mean you have to continue to be angry.
And it also, to me, it says that the demons are real. We're not making this up.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this is what we're stuck in. And that's what it means to be incarnated.
Yeah, that's I think what the Rohatsu is about for me. The Rohatsu was this last one saying, oh yeah, this isn't just a construct.
Yeah.
So, next. Anyone? Don't be shy. We just can't, same ones can't come up again. That's all. You were raising your hand. Did you want to do one?
Sure, but
Joseph,
just if you're welcome to
Go ahead.
if you want.
Yeah, there's no rush.
after you, Alphonse.
With 15 minutes left.
Okay. I'll start being briefer.
So just to kind of work with the previous question that was asked, my question would be, is there a diminishing, sort of like a diminishing return on investment with the amount of time a person spends practicing? So for example, you know, if I'm getting a certain amount of benefit from an hour a day of practice, do I get twice the benefit from 2 hours? Or do I maybe start to have less benefit?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Your mileage may vary.
Your mouth per
30,000,
gallon.
yeah, 30,000 mile radius.
Your mouth per gallon maybe.
And your results may vary.
Why did my tire wear out after 20,000 miles?
The traditional idea, I think, is there's so many factors in play that we none only had to hear somebody say a line from a verse, and then he was slammed with profound insight. He was ripe and ready. And so it depends on so many circumstances. It's often said merit from past lives. A given individual may be a superior. Superior in Zen is this person is, by dint of previous lives, like Buddha, was ready for this kind of insight. And had nothing to do with what you learn and do in this life, or has little to do, not just to do with this life, but also past life and so forth. Where a person is talented, you might say they're a talented individual, superior. This does not mean intelligence, more intelligence. It has none of the measurables. So it's interesting that you bring up the idea of measuring. And if you think of quantitative things, on one hand, you have qualitative on the other, right? I come from a background in research as well as design, and there's what's called qualitative research and quantitative research. Qualitative research is where you go in not knowing the questions that are important. And you try to find out what's important to the people you're trying to affect. Quantitative is once you know that, you can sort of verify statistically on a larger scale. So if you think of quantitative and qualitative like that, I always thought from the beginning, because Matsuoka Roshi never did long retreats while I was there, the qualitative was what was important. That just sitting still enough, long enough, when you're sitting, you're just sitting. You turn up the intensity knob. It's a qualitative more. People would come in, Dokusan, I need to do more zazen. When can you do more zazen? You can't do more in the past, you can't do more in the future. You can only do more now when you're doing zazen. So the more is only qualitative. You can only do more zazen by cranking up the intensity while you're doing it. It has nothing to do with time. But then when we started doing retreats, it has nothing to do with larger quantity of time. Sit still enough, long enough means how long is long enough? How still is still enough? So those two things come together where you will know for sure when it's enough. If there's any doubt in your mind, it's not enough. So, but I came to see or understand that you can't separate quantitative and qualitative in Zen. So if you go on these longer retreats, even though hour by hour you're getting nowhere from what you can tell, that's the monkey mind getting in the way. After the retreat, you can often look back on it and say, wow, that's different, you know. Or if you look back 5 years ago, how crazy you were, and you look at how you are now, you say, what's the difference? I've been practicing Zen, could that have anything to do with it? So I think we resolve this question in practice experience. Nobody can give you a formula, there's no cookie cutter. But I would just say that in Zen you cannot separate qualitative and quantitative. That doesn't mean that the more, I don't think the measurables are as important as that you don't give up, which was what Matsuoka Roshi was always cautioning. How frequently, how regularly, how consistently, how long you sit. I don't think those things are nearly, the measurables, things you can measure, are nearly as important as the qualitative side. And partly because you can measure them. And just the simple act of measuring them gets in the way. So when you sit in Zazen, I think you want to enter into real time. You want, all the Zazen Shin, all these wonderful teachings we're talking about are letting all that fall away, where you're not relying on that anymore, right? And you can return to some sort of reality that clock time sort of interferes with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's a non-answer. So Joseph had something. I wish I could kneel like that. I can't kneel like that anymore. My muscles won't. You're going to acupuncture me, right?
That's right.
So my question is, the Buddha was a prince with every type of worldly success and attainment and pleasure before he went on this path. So we're not princes. We're lacking in a lot of those things. Is it really a path for someone who's not already been a prince or a princess or emperor?
I had somebody actually argue this, that you have to do literally everything the Buddha did.
Mm-hmm.
But you really don't know what the treasure really is. Dogen at the end of Fukan Zazengi says, the treasure house will then open of itself and you will be able to enjoy it to your heart's content.
Mm.
He says many things like that, which, like he said, actualize within non-thinking. This is something we can actually do and know is working. Manifested within non-interacting, we cannot make this manifest. It has to come to us. So similarly, the treasure house opening of itself is not something we can make. We can't force that door open. So the real treasure that we have in our life, everybody has. We talk about, for good reason, distribution of income, equality, and the social and economic sense. But in a much deeper way, it already is equal. it's not equal in all the measurables that we can come up with, but it's equal in a kind of fundamental way, according to Buddhism. But to get at the treasure calls for the backward step. It calls for a contrarian approach, which is 180 degrees from logical. Right? The prince Siddhartha turned his back on all of that because he could see that wasn't going to get it. Baba Ram Das came to speak at the University of Illinois while I was there, and he went through his whole trip of position at Harvard, boats, airplanes, cars, conquests, he said he got to the point he realized another one that he wanted to go after on any level was just going to be that. So there's never going to be enough. And that's when he took a trip to India with the Guru and all that story came about. So he ended up saying, he said, don't get me wrong. He said, I'm not encouraging you to, not do any of that. Go ahead and pursue all that. But while you're pursuing it, watch yourself pursuing it. So, if you see yourself pursuing these baubles and things that seem to be attractive or addictions, again, it's probably healthy to think of them as demons outside yourself, trying to, as Buddha was assailed by the hordes of Mara, the seductresses and the demons, and appealing to his ego, raised to the level of a god, all these temptations, they're still here. They're on every channel on television. So I think it's better that we forget the circumstances of his birth. Now, maybe traditional Buddhism would say because of his past lives, he was born into these favorable circumstances. That's kind of like prosperity religion, long term. Like, okay, I'm going to suffer this life, but next life, guess what? I have a ball. So I think it's better for us to set that aside as wealth, treasure, and look at what Buddhism is pointing to as the true wealth. Ramakrishna said something about that. He taught his students about the ocean of consciousness, and a student came in one day and said, I see what you mean. I've seen the ocean. I can see its surface. I know what you mean. And he said, but you have to dive in. He said, no, I don't want to dive in. I'll drown. I'll die. He said, but this is the ocean of consciousness. The jewels are at the bottom. So in Buddhism, the Dharma gate is used in that way. So you have to go through something. And it's probably your worst nightmare.
Is all those, whatever you want to call them, conquests, bubbles, attainments, wealth, power, I guess my question comes to is whether that becomes fuel that you burn for your practice.
The disappointment would. Right?
Yeah.
One of the comments I made in my Dharma about is all you have to do is look at the close-ups of the faces of politicians, and you see the demons pursuing them. They're not happy.
There's a museum in Philadelphia, the Muir Museum of Medical Oddities, and they have this one exhibit, a permanent exhibit, with all the health problems of every single president. Every single one of those guys was eaten up from the inside out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how the chronic diseases and chronic pain they were in, how many of them got anything done. Even the ones that we consider successful.
Well, you can look at just the aging process in the 4 or 8 years with those guys.
Yeah.
You have the other demon of trying to, that are not physical. You have the ones that are, well, Matsuoka Roshi always argued that the mind and body cannot be separated, and they're intricately interrelated, so you can't really separate the physical and mental, emotional, and so forth. But if you look at what is pursuing people in positions of power and wealth, it's just, horrible.
If you're teaching.
Even the ones that are happy, who think they are happy or feel happy, you know. How are we doing on time? Where are we?
Getting close.
Okay. One more? Anybody?
I have a thought from what Joseph said. To me, I don't think it's, you can't, I don't think we could do a direct experience in terms of what Shakyamuni went through, because we all have different treasures to us. We all learn to give up and sacrifice and let go of our clinginess to different things. Some people, like, yeah, I think it's kind of hard to look at that way. But the main thing is letting go the clinginess, letting go of the grasping, the greed for more knowledge and more degrees and more cars and more money or whatever that may be, as well as looking at even health, you know, like, yeah, what is health? Because to me, sickness is not suffering, pain is not suffering, but letting go of the pleasure of being healthy, you know, letting go of our craving for a beautiful, youthful, young body, that to me speaks more, I think, to how the practice can help, because it means different things at different times, right, as an individual, because that's why this is our practice. Everyone practice on our own. So, yeah, I feel like that helps me in terms of breaking through those illusions.
Well, you look back on your life too, you see turning points where if you've gone this way, through what you did, you know, you may have become wealthy, you may have become powerful, you may have, but you didn't. You didn't do that. You did this. You know? So then you have to say, well, am I just stupid? You know, did I just blow all my opportunities? In my case, that may be true. But the path you chose, the way you chose to go, is what you got. Is what you got now. You got the consequences of it, right? And so, you know, that's kind of an infinite regress to what might have been. But if you could have made a great wealth, if you could have accumulated great wealth at some point in your life, and you didn't, you chose to do something else, right, that had value to you. I doubt that most of us took all of our lesser options in our life, right? Every choice we made and every turn we took looked pretty good to us at the time, right? It looked better than what something else we might have done. So we followed this path through all these turns, and here we are. Right? And this is what the accumulation of all that is what we have right now. Doesn't mean we can't change in the immediate present, take a different road, take a different route. But in Buddhism, saying, you know, all of that is circumstantial. It's not exactly superficial or unimportant, but it's circumstantial. The fact that you're male, female, of ethnicity or race, we say there's really no such thing as race, but whatever categories you want to use, are circumstantial. There's something that is not circumstantial. Circumstantial means out here in the peripheral. There's something central, right? So what is central? If it's not all that stuff. In Buddhism, said Buddha seeking Buddha. Buddha is trying to wake up. And this is the vessel or vehicle by which Buddha is trying to wake up. So, you know, all the names that we can throw at what is this so-called self, Buddha is the last name any one of you would probably throw at your own self, right? You wouldn't think of yourself as Buddha. But another simple example, Dogen, about birds and fish. It says in Genjo Koan, if the bird leaves the air, it will die at once. Fish leaves the water, it will die at once. Know that the water is life, and the air is life. The bird is life, and the fish is life. Life must be the bird. Life must be the fish. So we think we're doing this, right? I think I'm the author of this. This is my life. But what this teaching is saying is like Buddha seeking Buddha, not so fast. There's something trying to wake up here, and by definition it can't be you. You are, a temporary conglomeration of skandhas and so forth. What you identify with as you is this temporary thing, like a jellyfish, right? And you're not really in control of it. You didn't cause its birth. You blah, 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 on and on and on. Right? So life must be the bird. Life must be the fish. So you can think of it as life. Life must be Carol. Life must be you, Sin. Life must be. Life is being us. Right? So it's kind of neat because you're not really responsible for that. You're responsible for what you do with it. Right? So if we take this funny abstract idea of Buddha seeking Buddha, and that's another one of those. We say, Buddha is trying to wake up here. Am I going to get in the way? Am I going to try to get out of the way?
Thank you for your teaching.
Nobody said it would be easy. Beings are numberless, I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Thank you for your patience in listening. It wasn't much of a Dharma Combat, but the tea was good. So 12:30 at Atkins Park. Everybody who can come, please do so.
Where is
Goes all the way down Highland. It's across the street from the big parking lot. It's next to Blind Willie's, or in that block, I think.
Opposite corner of Blind Willie's, where Virginia Island.
There's rows of bars, and
Wait, that's actually after Virginia.
it's past what used to be the American Roadhouse.
Okay.
If you put on your phone,
So,
it'll
I'll
come
Google
up.
it.
Yeah.
It's like where